This week we take a break from our travel videos to answer one of the most commonly asked questions to any van lifer. How much does this lifestyle cost?
So we're going to break down our van life expenses from our first month travelling Europe.
So without further ado, let's get into the video. Hi guys, and welcome back. Apologies for there not being a travel video this week, but we wanted to answer one of the most commonly asked questions that any van lifer gets, and that's all to do with how much it costs and how much money you need to live this lifestyle. So if you're new around here, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Naz and this is my wife Rosie, and we're currently travelling around Europe with our rescue dog Lola in our self-built camper van.
So let's get into the juicy details. So our initial budget was £1,500 per month.
We based that £1,500 not really on anything, and we didn't really have any expectations about what things would cost when we got out here.
Yeah.
We left on the 4th of January into France, and it was time to actually put that into action and see if we could stick to it.
So for our first week we were travelling through France. We basically wanted to get through there as quick as possible. France was probably one of the most expensive countries that we went to.
Well, it is the most expensive, yeah.
Yeah, so far it's the most expensive.
Yeah.
And I think you can definitely tell that within our first week budget.
Since leaving France, all of our categories of spending have dropped dramatically. So because we were doing a heck of a lot of driving to get through France, our diesel for week one was our biggest expense by far. In week one we spent £230.07 on diesel.
So the prices of diesel in France were probably either on par or a little bit more expensive than the UK. We didn't really expect it to be that expensive. Our second highest category for the week was spent on food. We spent a total of £97.73, which it's not awful.
I don't think it's too bad.
I think that's all right for a week. We were sort of topping up throughout the week quite a bit as well. It wasn't just on one big shop, whereas I feel like now we do one big shop and it lasts much longer.
Obviously we were in a new country. When we were travelling about, we wanted to go to this shop to see what they had and this shop to see what they had.
Yeah.
So we did spend a lot on food. And then obviously when you're driving through France, a big expense you've got to factor in, unless you decide to avoid them, are the tolls. So we spent a total of £70.26 on tolls this week. The toll roads for us were way more convenient. They were pretty cheap apart from one, which is 26 quid. The only other thing that we spent money on that week was overnight parking, so in the French airs and campsites as well, and that came to £46.69.
Yeah, that is very expensive.
That is very expensive. Looking back on it now, when we've been on the road for a month, in that week we spent £25 on a campsite for one night. So
yeah, but I think we're just getting used to it.
We're getting used to van life, and we kind of wrote this first week off as a learning experience, and we were obviously going to spend more money because you just pick things up on the road that you do to save money, which we will go into later.
So for our first week, the total ended up being £444.75, which is definitely one of the most expensive weeks we've had.
Yeah.
And I think that we will have
on this trip. Yeah, like I said, learning experience. We haven't spent that much since. So after the end of week one, we crossed over into Spain. So that means cheaper diesel prices, cheaper food prices, and not very many tolls. Although there were some tolls.
Yes, we thought there wasn't going to be any more tolls, but we were very wrong.
Very wrong. So in week two, we spent £67.14 on diesel because we did far less driving than we did in week one getting through France.
Our second highest was food, and we managed to spend £59.60.
Well, that dropped down from almost £100
down
to just under 60. So we were definitely learning to just buy in bulk and cook cheaper meals, I guess. And then, yeah, like we said, we did get caught out with some tolls in Spain, which we weren't expecting, but we only spent just over 30 quid on those.
In week two, overnight parking cost us £33.40. I think that was, again, two stays in a campsite.
In week two, we spent £18.92 on just bits and bobs, miscellaneous things that we need for the van or ourselves.
And then a tiny little category, we did our washing, and that only came to £8. So that is week two all done and dusted. So
in week two we spent £217.94. However, an extra expense in week two was the van breaking down and our alternator needing replacing, which came to a whopping £335.42. So week three we crossed over into Portugal after spending just over a week in northern Spain. And this week, food actually was more expensive than the diesel we spent. So we spent £80.68 on food this week.
In second then, diesel diesel, so we managed to spend £73.65 on diesel.
And Portugal also have tolls.
Surprisingly.
So we spent £45.82 on tolls.
And then we only spent one night on a campsite, so that came to €19.
And then again, our bits and bobs category, just the miscellaneous stuff, was £18.
So for week 3 then, we managed to spend a total of £237.15.
So we actually don't know how we spent so little money in week 4. So we spent no money on diesel that week. We were just riding off the fumes from the last week.
We managed to spend £71.60 on food. I think we were still in Portugal at this point.
Still in Portugal, so the prices
still a little bit expensive,
were still expensive.
Not too bad.
And thankfully, as we got down through Portugal, the tolls completely stopped. So we spent nothing on tolls in week 4.
And then because we were in Portugal, it's really difficult to wild camp. So we spent a total of £34.59 on overnight parking.
2 or 3 campsites, because we just couldn't wild camp anywhere.
So because we can't wild camp, the actual campsites are a little bit cheaper. I think they're about €10 to €15 a night. It's not too bad then,
Not too bad. Our bits and bobs category again, this week it was £27.45. And included in that bits and bobs category was the very first time that we decided to actually eat out after nearly a month on the road.
And then in week 4 we did another load of washing, and that only came to £6.83.
So the cheapest week out of the 4 by far. This week we only spent £140.47 for everything.
Absolute bargain.
And by the end of this week we were crossing back over into southern Spain, where we'd see cheaper diesel prices, cheaper food prices, and thankfully no tolls. So there's 4 weeks of expenses travelling 3 countries around Europe, and we were really surprised by just how little we actually spent. In total, for the driving, we spent £370.86 to travel over 2,500 miles through France, northern Spain and Portugal.
Our total for food then for the entire month came to £309.61.
And then the worst category of all, the tolls, we spent £146.96 in total across the 4 weeks.
Ouch.
Ouch.
For overnight parking we spent £133.68.
And then for our miscellaneous category, our bits and bobs, we spent £64.37.
Finally, for our washing category, we only managed to spend £14.83. So that's definitely way under what we expected we were going to spend for the month.
So the grand total for everything comes to £1,040.31. So without taking into consideration that we had to fix the van, we came almost £500 under budget than what we thought we'd spend.
However, even by fixing the van, we were still under budget.
We were still under budget. So being as we only spent just over £1,000 in our first month, it was time to sit down and revise a new budget for month 2. And we've pretty much landed on £1,000 a month, because we're not travelling through France again, which was our most expensive country by far, staying in Spain, and then we're going Eastern Europe. So £1,000 a month is what we're now setting ourselves until we go home.
So that means that our goal is to only spend about £250 a week, and so far, sneak peek, we've managed quite well.
We have managed quite well.
So how did we manage to spend so little money?
Well, the biggest one, we don't treat this trip like a holiday. So we're not going out every night, eating in these nice restaurants, drinking out every night. Almost every night we're cooking in the van. So by doing it that way, we're saving ourselves a ton of money on food. We also try and stay off campsites where we can, so that saves us a lot of money by having a lot of free stays wherever we go.
In regards to saving money on fuel, we always check on Google to see where the cheapest petrol stations are.
And it can be sometimes 30 or 40 cents a litre cheaper if you just get your phone out for a minute and check. So we've been in Spain getting it for about £1.30 a litre, which is about £1.15, which is absolutely great.
And lastly, we always try to shop in budget supermarkets, sort of like Aldi or Lidl, and I feel like that has definitely helped.
Yeah.
So we basically made this video just to show that this sort of lifestyle, travelling around Europe, is actually quite achievable. As long as you've got a budget in mind, anything's possible.
So that's our first month on the road over and done with. If you're interested to see what we spend in month 2, and if we actually did stick to our revised budget, then hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for month 2 budget breakdown in a couple of weeks.
If you did like this video, then please consider dropping us a like and a follow.
And let us know if you were surprised by just how much we spent, and also if you think we have any chance of sticking to our revised budget. So with all that being said, next week it's back to our travel videos through the south of Spain. So stay tuned for those, but until then, we'll catch you next time.